who is the trust for the management corporate. I'm from the community of Olio, from the Mapio family. I noted that you mentioned a number of challenges, but you did not mention the reliability of the suppliers. Because for me, in the community-wide, I get what I might like once a month. So it means that I need to find an alternative source. In addition to that, I often ask, where is the equity in getting water once a month and then paying for water? Because this is the biggest issue for us in our community right now.
Okay. These are concerns that have been taken into consideration. I'll tell you, the Olio has a peculiar problem. We're getting, because of its elevation, first thing. And secondly, we have an intake that has become quite vulnerable to rains. And thirdly, we have very old pipes, like the main transmission pipe from the intake to Olio. Now, what has happened over the past months? Okay, we've replaced certain sections of those pipes. For example, like I think there was a time where we changed like 25 lengths of pipe, and that improved the service to Olio quite well. There's a place called New Jack City. You're from New Jack City? Right. There's a lady who has been calling me from that place, and since we did that change, she hasn't called me that much. She hasn't called me that much at all.
But you know, I want to add to her point.
Yes.
You know, I mean, when we have the issues of no water for such a long time, you know, it almost it creates another problem. You know, it creates another health problem.
Yes, yes.
Because now you have persons or people relying on alternative sources, which may be compromised, and it creates another dynamic to that whole situation of water. You know, I just wanted to add that to her point.
Yes, I'll tell you what we have in plan for Olio, right? We are going to change the entire pipeline. Okay? Yeah, the entire pipeline. We already have plans in place for doing that. Okay, the entire transmission pipeline, so that will allow more water to get into Olio. And also we're going to improve on the treatment facility.
You don't have a treatment.
No, you have one, but it's not working. There's not enough water is getting into it. So by changing the transmission line, we'll allow more water to get into it. And we're also going to improve the overall treatment facility so that we'll be able to get a more reliable supply. This is a problem for us over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is there a plan for you to construct or develop a new intake area in Tomazo?
In Tomazo?
Not Tomazo, Torres.
Yes, yes, there is.
Now, if so, what other interventions are you taking right now to make sure that the lands above Torres, which now has regrown into secondary forest, what are interventions you are taking right now to secure the protection of the lands above? Because from my knowledge, there are about 482 acres between that point and the reserve. What other interventions are they going to take to secure the area for that catchment? Because I don't believe you are going to investment and while you're doing that, people decide, okay, well, let's go back there, so start going to get that. Let's start chopping because things getting hard. I need to start providing food on my table. I'm going to plant dash and I'm going to plant yams inside there.
This is one of the areas where we have to work talks with forestry, and also prominence to be able to secure those lands. If this doesn't happen, imagine we put all that infrastructure in place, and it will not be able to fully supply what we want it to supply. So we have to work talks with forestry and prominence to secure those lands. But nothing from what I know has happened in terms of securing those lands.
How feasible would it be if you were to use the water that is captured at Union in the thing that was built there?
Yeah, the quarry?
How feasible would it be to have some form of temporary treatment facility and have that water being pumped up north? How feasible would it be to do that?
Are you talking about the quarry?
Yeah, the quarry water. Yeah.
Okay. From what I heard, this water is brackish.
It's brackish.
First thing, it's brackish, and you will need
Has
to.
it been tested to verify?
I am not too sure, but I'm sure it has been. Okay, with brackish water, you have to do desalination. Okay, and as you know, this is not the cheapest form of water treatment. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
To respond to the water at Williams considered brackish, but in terms of the dry season, couldn't it be that
Of course. Dry season, dry season creates a demand that has to be satisfied. Whichever is the best source, and the source that can be tapped on the quickest and being able to deliver the fastest, these are sources that we would tackle. There are interventions. For example, we're considering doing underground abstraction. Okay, in certain areas in Dennery and Beaufort. So all those interventions will help in improving our resilience in dry weather.
As a follow-up question, to that, but I have another question.
Okay.
The follow-up question is the underground water. I don't know if you have all of the information and details of. Do we have, can you quantify it, whatever?
I don't think this has been quantified.
Right. So that is a concern that I have in terms of going forward with this. It's not that it's a bad idea, but if we're not able to quantify at this point, it's a very expensive undertaking. And if we find out later on that it is the yield from this, it's going to be a disaster.
What you have to realize is that with those interventions, tests will be carried out to determine the yield of each one of those well points. So if small amount of monies are expended to determine those yields, if they find out that this area is not as bountiful as supposed to be, that saves you from spending a lot of money.
The real question that I wanted to ask before, you speak of standards a while ago, and that's my opinion and based with my knowledge in this industry. When you set yourself standard before you set yourself targets or guidelines,
Yes.
you tend to run in, as advised, you tend to run into problems because when you guidelines are strict rule, if you deviate from it, you're breaking your own law. When you set guidelines or targets, then you work towards those guidelines or targets, and then you can think of standards.
Yes, but Mr. Yudovic, we or the public is expecting a lot from us. Okay, those guidelines and standards have to be established, and we as a company have to work towards achieving those. We cannot run away from it, and we should not even put that in our mind to think that by raising the bar up to that level, that we're actually trying to, or putting the bar at a level that we cannot reach. There is nothing that we cannot do if we put our minds to achieving it. Nothing.
No, there's a cost to setting up standards and as opposed to guidelines. Because the first that was established was WHO guidelines, and each country was supposed to set up their own standard based on those guidelines. So if there were no guidelines, there wouldn't have been standards. So that's what I'm saying. Are we thinking standards before guidelines?
We're thinking guidelines should be first.
Right. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, okay. I know you have on board a PR consultant there.
Yes.
And based on two interventions, one that the lady from the, I don't know, when she talked about this morning, the one of the sprinkling, in this time, sprinkling
irrigation.
And she called. And your frontline people said, well, is that person admitted? You know, then you have a serious problem. But you alluded to the fact that your people need some training.
Yes.
But I feel before you do PR out there, I suspect Clinton is PR from out there. You need to do some PR inside.
Oh yes,
there.
definitely.
And judging from what you said there again, you're putting a fight to solve a problem that what the lady asked for, and the lady ain't called you. I mean, you haven't returned to the place and see what the result of your intervention.
No.
You just based on the lady ain't called you?
No. Listen. I probably didn't expound enough on that. After 3 days, I called her. I asked her how the service went. No. She was quite thankful. No. I took her number and I called her.
Okay, all right.
No. Sorry, I missed that out. I called her.
But now my question is, I think you made one of your first points. I don't want to misquote you, but something to the effect that the act was for privatization.
Yes.
What made you suggest that?
Okay.
And where can you put any part of it?
I'll be frank with you. I'm not well versed in this. I wrote this based on my discussions with Mr. Joseph this morning. So if you need a little bit more information on this, please.
No. But I perhaps know the answer.
Oh,
Because I have nothing before you.
I know that.
I agree with you see, but when you make statements, you need to lay thoughts.
Yes.
You pick up that act, and nowhere will you see anything mentioned of privatization. But there's sometimes the law and the spirit of the law. So I been around, and you not been around at the time. I could attest to that the spirit of that was to get to that situation. Because the act that was framed before was actually done to suit Wasco. That act was referring to the first company, which is Wasco. And their proposal could attest to that. That's the act that was withdrawn. Now when you're making an act, you don't make an act specific like that. So the other one there now, notwithstanding, it was done with private sector participation in mind. It doesn't allude to that at all. But where you could see the spirit of that act is inclined towards is that the kind of standards, that's why we couldn't apply the quality of service standards that were prepared based on that act. And even certain people even consider that the whole tariff, the mechanisms, is still too elaborate for a pure company like I think. Because when I say that there's no ridicule intended, but what I'm saying is that perhaps that these things are more complicated. It's more for an international operator, and you're correct. But you must understand how to detect it, where because it's not specific. It doesn't say anything about privatization. But yeah.
Yeah, but to put that in perspective, the act was part of a process. The World Bank project, the intention at the time was to bring in a strategic partner for WASCO. So, in effect, he's right. It's just that part of the project, well, the project was not completed.
That's why I said
the project was not completed.
That's why I alluded to the spirit of the act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because the project was not completed, then
he must know why he
the full impact of it. Yeah.
And he admitted that you're not too familiar.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to help him out here.
Point taken, Mr.
Yes. My points are always based on from a public health point. And what I'm going to ask is currently where we are in terms of the drought and the balance, on the periphery, maybe a drought or not. I mean, what adaptations are you are going to undertake if we do go into a drought in terms of providing water?
We're doing a scheme that was not done during the last drought. In that we have completely revived Wavin Passon. In addition to that, we've done a temporary intake on the Vanna River. Okay, what this will do is be able to augment the loss that we would suffer from not being able to abstract at the rate from John Compton Dam at the rate that we would want. So it just augments what we.
So is it on par to what you would have abstracted, or is it below?
Slightly bigger. Slightly bigger.
So you could maintain your
Yes.
current production and outputs.
Yes, but and also the production this time is higher than what happened in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Questions. One, what's going on the main abstractors of water?
Will you speak a little louder?
Yeah, what's going on the main abstractors of water from our rivers or natural water? What is WASCO doing to improve the supply or to secure the supply of water for the future? Because as we know, our water supply is depleted, and it appears to me that it's mainly forestry, Ministry of Agriculture, water resources. It appears that these are the main people looking at securing the water supply. WASCO, as a number one consumer, what are they doing to contribute to that? One. Two, as a distributor, does WASCO have any plans to supply other water apart from domestic water? Because there should be domestic water, agricultural water, and maybe industrial water. At the moment, we have to use domestic water for agricultural purposes. That's water that has been treated. That's what we refer to as expensive water. We have to use that same expensive water for washing cars and concrete. So is there anything in the pipeline with WASCO in the future will be providing other water sources apart from this domestic?
Okay, first, on your first question, I'm not sure if WASCO has done anything to be able to secure that water supply in the scale of what forestry does in terms of reforestation.
Or are they even contributing?
I am not too sure. Okay, now with your second question about provision of this other supply of water. You may, as a company, you may want to do such, but it's quite expensive to do that. For example, let's look at a typical case where you have an intake and you have one transmission line. Sometimes the water that this line carries is not even sufficient to feed the wider for domestic consumption, far less having to use that water to do agriculture. You know, sometimes it's just not feasible to be able to use that same water for both domestic and agriculture. The source is just not adequate.
Let me just
Hello.
I'll
Could you direct this? Let me say your question.
Chair,
Another time.
the reason I put my hand up is because I checked Mr. Answer's out, and I wanted to speak on in terms of Trevor's earlier question, and it would have answered the first question that Quint was raising there. So I'd like to refer to Mr. Andy. I was only going to speak because I didn't see him. So Mr. Andy.
Yeah, basically to respond to the question before this one, WASCO, like any other commercial or industrial business, has to obtain abstraction license from the agency. Alright, so if WASCO was to do what you were saying there, they would have to obtain additional abstraction license from us and then to serve that purpose of commercial persons. That is the reason why the commercial and they apply to us abstraction license to utilize water from the rivers for that purpose. So it's not WASCO's responsibility to do that. WASCO is just responsible for domestic use, providing domestic use, water for domestic use. Water for commercial and industrial, you have to apply to us for abstraction license.
If somebody was to want domestic agricultural water in Cabot State, there's no river to abstract from this. So that means that's a agricultural water in Cabot State.
Right.
Or you would have to use the domestic water
So for
and
now,
pay
yes.
the domestic rate.
For now, yes, yeah.
So
That's a garbage
people are using domestic water for agriculture.
I think we should have reached that stage and we need to start looking at in our next policy and execution. When we review it, for now it doesn't exist.
Mr. Weber, hold on. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to answer your question, though the water authority, based on even the act does not allow cater to one type of water, so that's why they treat water. The rest, they're not supposed to sell any other water. So they treat one grade of water. So you cannot by law sell water.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I know there's a situation that exists in Delhi where you'll extract water from a private land. I know water belongs to the natural resource belongs to the government. But the land resource that protects that water supply, the entire land resource belongs to a private owner. What arrangements you'll have with that private owner in terms of I would say he's kind of protected because he could easily decide, okay, I'm going to rent that area for gardening and I can rent 5 acres there and 10 acres there because he owns about 300 acres of land inside that area. And most of that land is forested. What arrangement is made between Wasco and that landowner?
You sure that that's a question for WRM.
Again, that would be our responsibility, but under the law, we can declare it as a gathering ground. All right? And request for that land to be gazetted as a gathering ground, and then government will have to find somewhere compensating that person. So we can declare it as a gathering ground was important for water. That's under the law that we will operate from.
Yes, sure.
Okay, there was earlier reference to not having options in terms of using domestic water for things like agriculture, but we do have other options. There's rainwater harvesting, for instance. So there are other.
But that's a policy issue.
When we most need the water is in the dry season. You have no rainwater to harvest.
Yeah, but if you collect, no, but you don't harvest. Okay. Could we ask the gentleman behind you, Charmaine, the fellow behind you, what they're doing about this particular one, the policy on rainwater harvesting? So he was asking about water for agricultural purposes. So I was putting the question to you. Do you have a policy on rainwater harvesting?
On rainwater harvesting? I think policies are not things that are necessarily written on paper, or necessarily something we can, as our solutions, we have a responsibility to water. So our behavior, our attitudes towards water is our policy towards water. Government is very clear on ensuring that everybody, that's its policy. It wants to ensure that everybody has access to water. But how you do that is not something that's going to happen overnight. There are, as I indicated this morning, there are cost issues, there are behavioral issues and things of the sort. So with reference to the gentleman's question, I quite agree. There are other options for providing water. Rainwater harvesting. The government does not need to legislate rainwater harvesting for us to know that that to manage our water, it's best for us to begin to retrofit our properties and seek other ways of dealing with water. You don't need a government policy to do that.
I respectfully agree, sir. I don't think you're right on that one at all. Because if we are facing a drought problem every year, at least if you have a policy in place, for example, in the Leeward Islands, you cannot build if you don't put in a system. In Anguilla, for example, I can tell you that for sure. Even in Barbados now, yes. What it does, it eases the pressure on the water supply system.
That's policy, that's legislation.
But the legislation is an instrument of policy.
I'm with you, but my point is that to ask what is government's policy and to suggest that policy is going to resolve it. Policy will not resolve the problem. It will. You cannot leave it to people's own initiative to decide they must put it in a tank.
Because every time, if there is drought, they do not have a tank, it means that they will be calling on to Wasco for water.
I hear you, but I'm hearing a kind of as though government has to solve all the problems of water. Government cannot solve the problems of water. There has to be collective responsibility in moving this process forward. And to suggest that a government policy on water will resolve the problem, I think is extremely naive. If it is not as simplistic as that.
I have a number of people. I just understand. There are some people I have not heard. Okay, let me hear you for Zandi.
Okay. I'm not about the policy stuff, but I just want to do something I normally do. Put on the private sector hat. But seldom in the forums on that private sector is not represented, or maybe they just not shout. Mr. Anthony.
Yes, sir.
There's some suggestions based on what I heard you mention, which was interestingly based on the discussion with Mr. Joseph. Some of the words that you said, obviously based on the challenges, you guys would want to be doing certain things to make things better. And I must say I applaud WASCO's workers, engineers, staff, for decades trying to keep this place going and achieving as much as they can without some of the resources and knowledge. So you guys need an asset management plan. I will tell you straight off, you need to do that, and a lot of it could come from within. Engineers like yourself could rally for the support to get technicians to help to get that plan. You will find out the north of the island, I'm not sure what percentage of the population the north of the island is, but we all know it's the wide majority of solutions live to business work north of the island. You'll find out that that part of the island has one of the most modern infrastructure for water within the Eastern Caribbean. Okay? And I'm saying so because I'm familiar with it, as well as familiar with what happens in other islands. The problem would be managing and operating that system to ensure efficiency. That requires standards and qualities. The Roseau Dam, a lot of the developments that are put in brand new PVC pipes and pumps and all those things, they are there. You don't find that type of infrastructure in a lot of islands similar to Sewerage. So it's about managing that. You know how to do that if you have that asset management plan. Second point, the private sector in St. Lucia, we depend on profit as well. So don't think we could invest in Wasco and no one profit, and international agencies will come, private sector will come, and they will profit. So as much as it's been advocated that we're going to go, we may consider privatization, but more in line with local participation. Local participation are after profit as well. As to how much more, I cannot tell you. So we will be looking at the bottom line. Is Wasco viable? Okay? However, there's an answer. Right at this time, we talk about the union, the water at the union quarry. There's a lot of private sector interest in coming in without policies, without legislation, but looking at projects and partnering with entities like Wasco to say, hey, we probably have about 100 billion gallons of water in there. We could bring a container, desal container plant, and treat it for you. This is the cost. Pump it out there for you. It's empty, we're gone. Wasco, I don't think we need SOCO to tell them to do this, or the permanent secretary to tell them to do this. Because you have the mandate to provide water. You have to pay for it, there is a cost, and you can get that done. And you will get private sector partners to help you with that. Okay? Final thing is organizational restructuring. Wasco should avoid going on that road again and again. Get consultants report, put it on a desk, 10 years pass, 1 to 4. Thank you.
Yeah, you want to
well, I think you raised one of the issues, the question of salinity
provision of water for agricultural purposes, I think we should be looking at this direction. Because apart from providing the water for irrigation, there's also the production of sea salt, which can come out of it. My other concern is...
So they would have to run separate lines to get it to...
So the same plant can do both of it.
Yeah.
My other point is the question of pollution of rivers from agricultural sources. That has been a question that has been coming up over from the time agriculture started, I'm sure we have had a problem of pig farming in rivers. That has been happening year after year. It has been raised at many forums, but nothing is being done about it. I think we need to look at this thing a little more seriously. The persons who have the information, the technical information about the effects and so forth, are not in a position to take any decision as far as regulating is concerned. So I think there needs to be some kind of collaboration between the technical persons and the political directorate as far as that is concerned. Because as far as the politicians are concerned, they will never touch any farmer who is farming along the river bank. But we must know, at least get to a point where we develop policy and also the regulations to govern the policy as far as protecting the rivers are concerned. Otherwise, we'll continue having fish in the rivers per year down the line. While it may not appear to be too serious in some areas, but there are cases where you have downstream, people are using the water for many other purposes, both for irrigation and for even domestic purposes. Now, we talk about gap with agricultural practices. If we were to be exporting some of those crops to any supermarket overseas, and there is an inspection to find any pollution that would kill our markets. Even the hotels, if the hotels were to be tracking some of the sources of the produce, and realize that those rivers are the ones they use for irrigating our crops, and I probably stop our farmers. So I think this is a problem we need to get much more seriously, and the technical persons and policy formers should get together and try and deal with this problem once and for all.
Okay. Yes, Max.
I have a question, and I'm asking it out of ignorance, Victor, and I'm looking to you as one of the experts to answer. Not you to answer, but to guide and you to answer.
Okay.
And I have sitting behind me here a representative from Jubilee Bottling Company.
Right.
And you mentioned this morning the issue of bottled water, and how bottled water has taken off worldwide, and it's such a lucrative business right now. Everybody's getting into bottled water. And as I describe myself as a simple housewife kind of person. You know, if I do this and I sell that, I can make so much and so on. And I wonder what has prevented, or what utilities generally, and WASCO in this instance, from getting into that kind of market now. Not about legislation, I'm just asking as a viable business venture.
Yeah, I'd like them to answer
to not getting into it. You know, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
And even so, to be responsible, do it in a responsible fashion. I mean, I understand in St. Lucia there's some place where you can actually just, it's like a dispenser, a commercial vending machine. You put in a coin and you get your water out. I mean, I first saw it somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in Europe. What is preventing you from getting into that kind of income-generating activity that would affect your bottom line in a positive fashion? And I'm asking out of ignorance because I don't know all the ramifications.
Everybody has their opinions on that. This is the second time in 2 days I've heard this question.
Okay, so I'm not original. Go on.
WASCO has a mandate to provide a reliable, consistent, and safe water supply. It hasn't been able to deliver fully on that mandate. So what would people say if we go into the business of bottling water and not being able to deliver on our primary mandate?
If I generate, for example,
Yes.
make money
Yes.
to support
Yes.
expansion and investment and
But
so on.
even to do this at this point in time, it's going to be difficult for us because you have to invest in equipment and just cannot do it right now. Yes, sir.
Hold on. Please. Hold on. Go ahead. I need to finish.
No, I'm
All right, let me hear you, sir.
You made a point there, Deborah suggested that you think you stand microphone, but it's not so simple because WASCO operates under a particular law. The water bottlers have a different law. They're subjected to. All right. So first, and then you have the whole logistics. Where does WASCO get the funds? Because that's a different operation from what WASCO is required by law. So they have to get the legal authority first. And having got the legal authority, there is something called conflict of interest that you'll be subject to litigation left, right, and center from Blue Water and all of them. Because you know what? The suggestion is that you own the water. You know, so you don't charge yourself. You see, but you have to charge yourself the same thing you charging the other people. So which means is that the only room you have for competing with them is efficiencies. You get the point? So if you cannot compete there, then you could be subject to litigation for unfair trade. You know, predatory. You could be predatory. Okay, that's what it's all about. It's like you selling minutes, Cable is selling minutes for somebody who want to resell. All right, and they're in the same business. They have to sell. If they have a unit producing that same service, they have to sell their thing at the same price they're selling to people out there. So the only window for competing is your efficiency. And we know WASCO have a problem in being efficient, as you had said, they don't train everything, in even producing the core activity efficiently. I mean, these things sound very nice, you know. Why do they just do that and do that? But, you know, these things are complicated given the global dynamic too. You subject yourself to endless litigation that you might lose in court, and the fine alone could build a dam for you.
Yeah, oh, no.
Okay, madam? You all right?
No, not.
Yeah.
Government is a major shareholder in Windfresh, and Windfresh is in bottled water. How do you compare that with the WASCO? And one other point I would make too, regarding the desalination of the water, I mean, Antigua, there are many big farmers, that's what they use, desalinate water for the farms. So
okay.
You can look at that as examples.
All right, Deborah, just.
Before that, I just wanted to say that I think in this new dispensation, we need to be more familiar with what the Act really says, because from what points people have been raising, it's clear that the roles of different people are not clear. The roles of, now you now have a water resources agency with one role, and so when Travelling asked the question, I went to Jaffa and said, please explain that it's no longer WASCO's responsibility, that they are actually being given a license to abstract, not to take care of the watershed.
Right.
So we need to ourselves be familiar with their different roles. The question that Pat raised, I thought was a good question. It doesn't mean that when I made a little answer there, prize money, maybe it's time for us to think outside the box. It may not necessarily be bottled water. I remember years and years ago, I went to Italy and there was this acqua potable where you could just go in the wall and get water. And I was thinking as environmentalists, it may not necessarily be bottled water, but there can be places where you can, somebody said, I think it's you said it, put a coin. I mean, it may not happen now, but I somehow think that we need to begin to think outside the box of ways in which you can make it more sustainable, because currently it's not. And it's not, we have an environmental problem, we have all of these plastics in the oceans. So to me, we need to collectively, the time has come where we need to collectively think about our own survival. You know, so that's just a little point.
I just want to, Suku made a point I think that most people miss
It's about the dilemma that Wasco would face. Because what is possible will happen if Wasco goes into, and I'm not suggesting by any means I support the fact that Wasco is not involved in bottled water. But you have the possibility, Wasco is asking for a rates review at the moment. You have a company responsible for distribution, and you get into a business that is profitable. There's always a possibility of cost subsidization. So Wasco could get in some kind of trouble being accused of subsidizing a failing business of distribution of water using the profits of the bottled water. So when you have regulated industries, you have to be very careful how you approach getting involved in production. That doesn't mean you can't, but at the same time, part of the market is liberalized where you can charge what you want. You may find Wasco getting into the market, perhaps selling a bottle of water for, say, $1.25. The market price is $1.50. Suddenly the private sector decides to go down to $1 and begins to force Wasco down as low as possible because they can operate more efficiently delivering bottled water. And then Wasco's distribution begins to get in trouble because it's cross-subsidized from the bottled water. We look at a case, just to cite a case in Antigua, where you have one company which is providing electricity, telecommunications, and water. And the telecommunications is really cross-subsidizing the two failing companies. Hence the reason why that Antigua was one of the countries which is yet to fully liberalize its telecommunications sector. Only last June that the last segment of liberalization was about to take place because of the attraction of keeping that cross-subsidy. At some point in time, there'll be some litigation, as Suku is suggesting, that some company will say, well, this can't happen anymore. And then the government will have to decide what it has to do and split up the companies once and for all. Because we have signed up to several different treaties now, WTO arrangements on ensuring that you have a free environment for liberalized companies to exist and so forth. And government can't be contradicting the same thing that they sign.
All right. Let me just say that for the past few minutes, we have actually gone into the open discussion. So right now, I think it's time for us to